Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Horned Frog Blitz podcast. Podcast number 5 on the books. I'm Jeremy Clark, joined always by my good friend Jeremiah Glenn. Jeremiah, how's things going for you, man?
It's going pretty good. Still recovering from that Texas Tech game, I think.
I'm still recovering from being scared to death driving in the black of the night.
In the middle of
nowhere. Seeing nothing but red lights. Man, we got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to talk, of course, about the TCU Texas Tech game. We're going to talk about the upcoming game against Texas, get a little bit with the visitor list coming in this week. It's going to be a pretty good list. Still more names to follow that we'll find out later in the week. Take a visit around the Big 12 now. The Big 12 play is kind of underway. A couple teams haven't played yet, like Baylor and I want to say, is it West Virginia that hasn't played a Big 12 game? And Kansas, I believe. But lots to talk about, man. But there is nothing better than to kick off this podcast with our experience up there in Lubbock and what we saw. A lot of heart, a lot of determination from the Horned Frogs. And probably, in my perspective, the best game I've ever seen in person.
I agree. I mean, I was trying to think of any other games that I've been to in person that were better. I think back to 2009, the TCU Utah game. That's always going to be a measuring stick game for me. But this game had a little bit of everything. You can talk all you want about how many points TCU gives up. You cannot deny the heart and the fight that this team has, and that's what I think you saw, and I think that's what this team is going to use to go forward. That they'll take this from that game is that they were down multiple times. They had a chance to fold up shop, and they never did, and they kept fighting, and they're getting guys back gradually here and there, and the stronger you get, maybe your defense continues to get better throughout the year. You never know what's going to happen, but they're going to score points, but to get out of that game, with the win, that was huge for the program. And
we said last week it was going to take a 50-point effort from the TCU offense to get out of there with the win. I predicted 59-49. The score came pretty close to that. Not trying to pat myself on the back at all, but you got, like you said, you got to give it to the offense for going out there and getting it done. And you and I sat in the press box and they had a good day on offense, and we talked about Boykin looking poised as he was. He looked confident. He never got rattled. There was never a point where you just thought TCU wasn't going to be able to go down and score. Now, of course, you always thought, can TCU put the brakes on Tech's offense? You got to hand it to Texas Tech. They're a much improved team from last year. I love Pat Mahomes. That kid's a player. Got hurt early on. Made it through some pretty severe pain, was able to make some plays throwing the football, and they've got some good athletes. They've got a very good offensive line, and Gary said on Tuesday that was the best offensive line that he's probably ever faced in playing against Texas Tech. That's a very good offensive team. Obviously, lots of holes to fill on defense, just like TCU, but like you said, a lot of heart in that team, and you get heart like that when you have a lot of senior leadership, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I got to tell you right now, if I'm a panelist on the Biletnikoff Award, I'm filling in Josh Dotson as the number 1 receiver in the country, because you talk about a kid who was playing. They knew, everyone in the stadium knew where the ball was going, and they still couldn't shut him down. You're talking about a guy that was playing without the benefit of having the fastest player in college football on the other side. You're talking about not having a guy like Ty Slanina opening up the middle, being able to catch passes over the middle from Boykin, and bringing in 2 young receivers like Jerison Stewart and Des White and guys like Kavontae Turpin having to step up for Josh to do what he did, and what he accomplished on Saturday was almost as miraculous as Aaron Green's catch.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see it on the team right now that these guys have the utmost respect for Josh. Talking to him, listening to him in the post-game press conference.
Man, what was the first thing he said about his game?
About the passes he dropped.
He dropped 2 passes.
The guy has 18 receptions for 267 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he can only think about the 3 passes that he didn't catch on the day. And one of the ones he counted as not as a catch was the last play that Green.
The last play he got a hand on. He said he got a hand on.
I mean, the guy had been like 45-inch vertical on that play to get his fingertips on it, and he's still upset that he didn't make the catch. But that's why he's where he is. That's why he went from going to Wyoming to coming to TCU as a walk-on to being an All-American caliber wide receiver, is because of the hard work and even Coach P says he puts more pressure on, and he's harder on himself than any of the coaches could ever be. And that kind of drive is what's made Josh Doctson become the receiver that he is right now. And I was just really impressed with his demeanor after the game. He just exudes leadership and confidence, but it's like a quiet confidence. And I can see guys like Aaron Green, and there's some serious leadership on this team, and Trevon and all these guys. It's a very tight-knit group, but they all look up to Josh. Like, they all look at him kind of like a big brother. And so it's really cool to see that and watch the maturation process of him as a receiver and as a team leader.
Well, let's go back to the last drive of the game, because it was funny because we're sitting in the press box, and of course we're sitting at the end of press row, and right next to us is the TCU suite that has some of the well-known donors. I think Chris Del Conte was in there for a little bit, and so we had a lot of cheering right next to us, obviously throughout the whole game. But that stadium and the atmosphere was so crazy. In Texas Tech, they could taste the upset. I mean, that was their Super Bowl.
Hey, those fans brought it. I mean, they were ready. They were ready for blood in that game.
They brought those water bottles too.
Yeah, they did.
Hey, you know what though? Yeah, there's always going to be horror stories going up there, and we didn't experience any of that. Of course, we're not wearing TCU purple or anything like that, but it seemed like a pretty calm thing. We walked by several tailgates, TCU fans interacting with Tech fans and stuff like that. But there's always going to be fan bases that have immature fans, a lot of students, and you can even see on some of that replay that some of those bottles get thrown from the end zone, where actually from some probably sorority girls just trying to be cool and be part of the action, throwing bottles on the field. But I'm not trying to defend anything about Texas Tech and their fans. But they did present a loud environment, and yet again the offense goes up there and gets it done. But we're in the press box, we're watching this drive, and again I'm watching Boykin the whole time, because he's just, I want to see, is this his Heisman moment? Is this going to be a defining drive that late in the year, if TCU does have a successful season and they do somehow, even with the depleted defense, finish among the top teams in the country, and people look at him as a Heisman candidate, will they remember this drive? And he made some key throws. That throw to Josh that got him down within the 10 was right on the money. And Justice Nelson had excellent coverage on that.
But he threw it where only Doctson can make the catch. It was a beautiful pass.
And coincidentally, the worst pass of the drive was the last pass of the drive, and that's one thing that you look at. You knew, I knew, everyone in the stadium knew that he was going to wait till Josh came out of that break. He wasn't going to throw to anyone else. He's taking a little bit of heat, not throwing it to Aaron, because listen, Aaron was wide open. Aaron didn't have anyone within 3 or 4 yards of him. But you can't blame Boykin for trusting his top receiver, especially after you've thrown and he's caught 18 passes for 267 yards. And if I'm Boykin, if I'm putting myself in his shoes, I've done the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm not even looking at any of the other receivers. I'm waiting for Josh to come out of his break, and I'm throwing it to him. But what's funny is that the reaction when it happened, because you're sitting right beside me, and I'm already typing on the board that it was incomplete pass. And so what did I say to you when I looked up my computer when all the TCU fans were basically breaking the windows in the suite? Who caught it?
Yeah.
Who caught it? And we're watching the replay, and everyone's just kind of freaking out about Aaron Green coming out of nowhere and catching that ball. And my exact feeling at that moment was disbelief. Couldn't believe it. Could not believe it.
First thing I thought of, and not to be corny, but was destiny. Like, for every great team, you always have to have some luck along the way. And there's always that 1 or 2 plays during a season that maybe defines a great team season. Now, it's still early. This can go any direction, but you almost feel like this is something that TCU is going to be able to build off of and feed off of. And obviously we'll know soon enough, but could this be one of those moments where you look back and go, this was a team of destiny for 2015, and that was a play that set them up for their run on the second half of the season. I as bad as the defense was, as many missed tackles as they had, I still believe they're going to get better. They're going to start getting some guys back. Some of these young guys, it's going to start to click with them. They just need more reps. And, Texas doesn't present the same challenge that Tech does. Kansas State doesn't either. These guys are going to get more reps against quality conference opponents. And if they can just hold on and get to the West Virginia game 6-0, I mean, who knows? But you got, like they say, one game at a time. You can't look too far ahead. One game at a time.
You're right. The funny thing that you mentioned right there was destiny, and you and I were talking about it on our long drive to Snyder that night in the blackness. Not really a divine intervention or anything like that, but could it not have been a better player to have something great like that happen to than Aaron Green?
Aaron Green's just such a good guy, and he's considered such a leader on this team. And he transferred from Nebraska. He had to sit out his year. He wasn't the starter behind Catalan, and once Catalan got injured, you saw him step up and take the reins as the main guy. You knew coming in he was going to have a big season this year. He's got this confidence about him, and he's a heck of a player, but he is a leader. And not just on the field, but off the field. A lot of the players look up to him. And for it to happen for those two guys together, Josh tipping it and Aaron making the catch, it couldn't have been a more perfect scenario.
Well, there's lots of good things and bad things we can discuss about the game. I want to dive into some bad things first. Obviously, you can't give up 52 points every week and expect to win. But again, we knew going into that game Tech was going to score some points and TCU was going to score some points. But the thing that I didn't like most of all, and I'll probably catch hell for this, but if you have a leader on your defense that's already depleted and you're giving up 2 personal foul penalties that were penalties that continued drives after a third down stop, you're going to be in trouble. And Josh had those penalties called on him, and we talked about it, and I know Gary talked about it a little bit. Have to show a little bit more leadership in that scenario. When you have those plays, two of those plays, actually both of those fouls, personal fouls, continued drives for Tech, and they scored 14 points off of it. That was the biggest disappointment that I saw on the night, was having a leader on that defense make those plays. And I'm sure Josh would tell you the same thing. He's disappointed in himself. The second one on the 3rd and goal was questionable, but you gotta remember, once you hear that whistle, man, you just cannot throw down, especially the quarterback. And when you let the refs dictate a game like they kind of did, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I really did feel like some of those penalties were ticky-tack, but like you said, you can't leave it in their hands. So,
right.
I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist. You don't want to be the person that complains about the officiating, but I really feel like TCU's been a victim of 2 games in a row of really bad officiating and key points of the game. People like to say, oh, you can't blame it on the refs, but a referee can have an absolutely huge impact on a game. I mean, just the momentum swing caused alone by converting a 3rd down and long because of a penalty. Yeah. Or, you're setting up a team with new life. And so that has, they can have a huge impact on the game. So, I'm not implying anything nefarious against the referees. I just don't like to see them have such a big thing to have to say about the outcome of a game. I'd like to see them let them settle it on the field. Look, TCU was getting called for a lot of penalties, and I counted no less than 4, and I guarantee there was more than that, but I counted 4 blatant holds on Tech that allowed for their running backs to get the corner and get a big gain. And so, you got to call it both ways. You're never going to have perfect officiating, but you just hate to see it affect a game so drastically. And I'm sorry, That was a fumble from Patrick Mahomes.
It was a
but
fumble.
it was also not a catch by Trevon
It was a
Boykin.
fumble and it was an incomplete pass.
And you know,
I told you in the press box when that happened. I looked over at you. I said, "That's a makeup call."
It's a makeup call, but the problem that I have with that is TCU's ahead 40-35 at that point. If they take over where Travon Howard recovered that fumble, they go into scoring a couple plays. It's 47-35. That's a completely different.
It's a different
feeling for a game.
Yeah.
So regardless if they did make that call up, which you and I agree, I think that's what it was, because Trey didn't catch that ball. That ball was on the ground. It doesn't have the same effect in TCU's favor as much as it hurt them to get the other one go against them. So you just hate to see plays that you think should be obvious calls go the wrong way. I can't believe that was overturned because there was not enough evidence to overturn that play.
Right. Well, you mentioned another thing about the holds, and that brings me up to my second disappointing thing I saw on Saturday was the run defense. And I'm going to give it, DeAndre Washington's a heck of a player. He's quick. He broke tackles. And it's kind of a mixture of the run defense not being there, and the inability of the defense to make tackles.
Because
there was a lot of times where they had them and they just didn't wrap up, or they just took bad angles. And like I said, you got to give it to DeAndre Washington. He's going to be a very good player in the Big 12. He's going to do a lot of good things.
I think he'll have a good NFL career. I think he's a good-looking running back.
He's an ideal third down back in the NFL. He can catch the ball. He can run. But he rushed for 188 yards, and you typically don't see that from a Texas Tech running back on TCU. But that was probably my second thing that I didn't like. Just kind of a mixture of them not really having a run defense and the poor tackling all night.
I agree. I mean, you can't allow a team to shred you like that on the ground. And like you said, numerous times TCU was in position to make a play and simply allowed guys to run out of weak arm tackles. I saw too many guys lowering their shoulder to make hits and not wrapping up. So these are all things that are correctable with a young defense. But unfortunately, I saw some veterans doing it too. So it's just Coach P likes to talk about habits and how when you form bad habits, how hard it is to get out of those situations. But that's what you're seeing is some bad habits forming on the defensive side of the ball with really poor tackling, and that's something they're going to have to shore up.
And you and I have been around the team long enough to know that there really hasn't been a year where a defense under Gary Patterson has not eventually been good. They're struggling right now, but as you mentioned earlier, I think as the year progresses that they're going to get better with each week. But it is kind of a benefit for him to have an offense that can score now. It's kind of like he said after the game. He goes, you guys were mad at me when I had to use a defense to win games. Now you're mad at me when I have to use my offense. What do you guys want? So I think every TCU fan would agree that they'd rather see their offense going out there and doing what they're doing right now because they know that's what it's going to take. But obviously we mentioned some good things that we saw. Josh and Aaron and Trevon, their plays, but the thing that I liked, other than those three players right there, was the offensive line's play. I liked the lanes they created for Aaron Green later in the game.
Early on, there was nothing there to run through.
And defensively, I know they gave up some big plays, but there was some plays where Corey O'Malley's coverage on Devin Lauderdale on that deep pass. He was there. It was like watching the ball go completely through his arm. He had great coverage on that play. A couple other plays on defense that definitely could have been difference makers in the game, but just didn't get it done. But the thing that kind of cracked me up, and it's going to be crazy, but it's probably my favorite part of the game is when Texas Tech was doing all those laterals back and forth to the last play of the game. And here's little old Michael Downing, Michael Downing, between him and 6'6", 315-pound LaRaven Clark. And Mike basically makes him do a front flip. And
that's a lot of weight coming down.
LaRaven had, he hopped right back up, but man, he had to feel that.
I'm sure Mike felt it too when he put his shoulder into that big old leg, that big ham bone. But no, I don't want to keep going on the Tech game too much longer. I do want to point one more thing out. I detailed and kind of described Boykin's stats on the road in his road games and how he had struggled on the road and how it seemed like in a lot of the bigger games on the road that his numbers weren't near as impressive. I really thought he turned a corner in that aspect this last weekend. That's a tough road environment for him. And you can say what you want to say about Texas Tech's defense. He still went in there and made those plays. He still stood there and looked very confident. And I think you're seeing a quarterback that has complete understanding of his offense and is completely in control of it right now.
Going back to two things I really didn't like. I didn't like Ty Salina getting hurt, and I definitely didn't like Emmanuel Porter getting hurt. I feel bad for Ty because Ty is such a great person and great player as well. And Emmanuel, luckily, will probably be back. Probably not play this week, but at least be back by the time for Kansas State or West Virginia. But we're going to move ahead to
how about no more injuries?
Yeah, that would be great.
No more. I'm just going to say, how about no more injuries, guys? I think we've seen the quota for this year.
You know what? It's got to be those cleats. Those shoes, man.
I'm wondering.
You know,
it makes you wonder.
I mean, those shoes caused Ty to break his collarbone.
You know it.
I mean, those cleats made the Texas Tech defensive back take out Emmanuel's legs.
Yep.
Good grief. We're silly, man.
You've heard it all.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Texas, man. Texas is 1-3, coming off 2 consecutive losses.
Hard luck 1-3.
Yeah. Their last 2 losses are by 4 points combined. And talk about the craziest way to lose 2 ball games.
They're inventing ways to lose.
I've heard they've made a new locker room for Nick Rose and that punter that they have down there because I don't know if they're liked too much by the teammates right now. But this is I was asked the other day, is this a trap game for TCU? And I don't believe in trap games when you have the senior leadership that you have on this team. If this team was loaded with a bunch of sophomores that were over exceeding expectations, then I could kind of say, you know what, this is a trap game. But TCU's been there before. They've been through the times where people thought they were going to have it like us last year, especially after the Baylor loss. There wasn't very many people that thought they would come in and beat Oklahoma State. Not only did they beat Oklahoma State, they beat them like a drum.
And they went on a roll after
And then
that.
they went on a roll. So this team is experienced. They're a veteran team. They're not going to have a letdown against Texas. Texas may be 1-3, but they, other than Notre Dame, they've played teams close. They obviously beat Rice, and they played Cal. I think Cal is 4-0.
Yep.
And what is Notre Dame right now? Are they 3-4-0?
Yep.
And Oklahoma State's undefeated. So their three losses aren't to bad teams. They're actually to some pretty good teams. And they've got things going on offense. Obviously, they got their quarterback with Hurd. He's fast. Yet another mobile quarterback TCU's going to have to face. And you've got Jonathan Gray that's running the ball a little bit better. And you've got some talented receivers. And the defense is very young. I think that's going to be the difference in this game because you have a very senior-laden offense going against a defense that is athletic, but they're still very young and inexperienced, and I think that will be the difference in this game.
I agree. As dynamic as Gerard Hurd is, I don't think he is enough alone to help keep pace in the scoring column with TCU. I don't want to picture this as another Texas Tech type shootout game, but I could see TCU scoring 45 to 50 points and Texas scoring in the high 20s to the 30s. I still think TCU should win this game by 2 touchdowns, but nothing's going to come easy for this team right now. Hurd's not quite the passer yet. He had a good passing game, but that's just a guy you're going to have to contain, not let him take off running on you. I would try to make him beat you with the pass. I just don't think he's consistent enough to do that, to lead that offense enough. And quite honestly, Texas doesn't really have the playmakers on offense. Now there's some impressive young guys.
Yeah.
I like John Burt. I think he's got a really good future ahead of him as a receiver.
I think Marcus Johnson's a pretty good
Marcus
receiver
Johnson
too.
is a very good receiver, but I still like TCU's ability on offense against anything that Texas is going to be able to throw at them.
The thing with TCU's defense right now, they are going through their lumps. But the good thing is when they face quarterbacks that are young, true freshman guys. I don't remember the guy's name, but remember the quarterback that was a true freshman for Utah. The year that they were pretty good, and TCU basically just.
I remember who you're talking about. I cannot.
He was a true freshman. I can't remember his name either, but he was a true freshman. Came down to Amon Carter, and he had a good year up to that point. And
he was not ready for that game.
No, he was not ready because schematically, the 4-2-5 is tough to prepare against when you're that young and you don't know how to play against it, and you're playing against guys just run sideline to sideline. TCU is extremely fast. No matter how inexperienced they are, they're still extremely fast on defense. And the schemes that Gary Patterson can throw at a young quarterback like that, I think it's going to confuse him. I'm looking at Hurd and thinking he's probably going to throw for around as long as they don't get beat with the deep ball on a consistent basis, because he can throw a good deep ball. But I'm thinking he's probably going to be in the neighborhood of maybe 120, 150 yards passing and probably 80 to 90 yards rushing. I don't know if that's going to be enough for Texas to get the win because, again, defensively, they've got to shut down one of the top offenses in the country, and they've got to do it with an even younger defense than what TCU's putting out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that they've got enough firepower on offense. And I really want to say I hate 11 a.m. games. Hopefully the guys are awake and ready to go. Surely they will be. They know what's ahead of them. But I would really like to see maybe a 2:30 game. You know, you can get the juices flowing a little bit. But
yeah.
They better come out with their chin straps buckled up and ready to go because Texas will be ready.
Yeah.
I mean, and each one of these teams has won on the other team's home field each of the last 3 years. So.
Well, that's the difference in this game because the road team has won since TCU joined the Big 12.
Yep, and so you know Texas is going to come in. They're going to give you their best shot, and regardless of being 1-3, they can look at themselves in the locker room and say, "Hey, we're a couple points from being 3-1," and they are against two pretty good quality teams. So TCU needs to be ready to play, but this is not in any way an insurmountable advantage in any way for Texas.
Well, those folks thinking that Texas is just setting the world on fire on offense now with Hurd, they had 290 yards last week against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is better defensively this year than they were last year, but 290 yards isn't nothing to write home about right now.
No, and Texas is scoring in a variety of ways. They're getting pick sixes and defensive touchdowns.
If you look at their last week, 30-27, two of their scores came on an interception and a fumble recovery. So you're talking about putting 10 or 13 points on the board on offense. And obviously Oklahoma State's a good team. They're I think ranked number 20 now, undefeated. But this game could go either way. I could see this game. I remember last year, a lot of people were suspecting that TCU was going to somehow, since Texas was playing better, go down to Austin and get upset. There was a lot of people that were worried about that. A lot of knee jerking going on, everything else.
There's a lot of respect nationally in that game for Texas going.
Yeah, there was. It wasn't really from us or anyone around us. I thought Texas would give them a better game, but there was people out there that were expecting Texas to win that ball game, and TCU just went down there and beat the living tar out of them, 48-10, and that game was never close to begin with. I will say they do have someone that has a pulse at quarterback this time around, and he will be able to make plays. But I'm not going to give my prediction yet because we're going to go around the Big 12 here in a minute. But I will go out there and throw out another prediction since my Texas Tech prediction came so very close. But let's go around the Big 12 for a second. Let's recap last week. Of course, we'll talk about Texas and Oklahoma State. Texas racks up 290 yards. Lose 30-27, lose off that blunder late in the game. Charlie Strong gets called for a personal foul penalty the series before that allows Oklahoma State to tie the game. And then the next possession for Texas, the guy fumbles the snap and tries to do like a cartwheel kick that goes, 7 yards or something crazy.
I feel terrible for those special teams guys making those mistakes, but those are plays you have to make. I mean, that was just a routine play. This is an Australian rules football player. His first year in college football.
See, why does everyone feel sorry for Texas, though?
I feel sorry for the kid. You got to think of this kid, this punter, just came over from Australia.
Think about the children.
He just, he makes a blunder like that just really, really could send this team spiraling out of control. If TCU beats them and then OU beats them next week, you're looking at 1-5. They'll be burning down Darrell K. Royal Stadium in Austin.
Well, let's go to Rutgers and Kansas. I think we picked Rutgers to win this game. They did, going away 27-14. They led 20-7 at halftime. Kansas is in trouble, man.
I heard
Kansas
that game
is in
referred
trouble.
to as the Dumpster Fire Bowl. So,
Yeah.
that's two really bad football teams right there. And Kansas is going in reverse at about 100 miles an hour right now. So it's ugly to watch.
That game this year in Fort Worth might get Texas Tech like. I don't think Gary will want to score 82 points, but man, that game is probably going to be a bad game.
You don't think he'd want to send a message over to Kenny Perry over there?
He might.
Just say, hey, Kenny. No, I doubt that he would do that. But yeah, that's going to be an ugly one in Fort Worth for sure.
Baylor and Rice. Baylor wins 70-17. Baylor probably could have scored 100 points in this game. I mean, they were on fire offensively. They've got everything clicking right now.
They've still yet to play a team with a pulse, but their offense is scary.
I will say this: Rice is better than what people will give them credit for. Rice lost to Texas, but again, Texas, had 2 defensive scores in that game.
Yep.
That was the difference. They won, I think, 42-28 or something crazy. But Rice had almost 500 yards of offense against Texas. Now, that's not saying Rice is good just because they had that many yards against Texas, but I'm just saying 70 points is not bad when I know they could have scored a lot more. That was a quality win for them. You would like to see if they could do it against someone in the Big 12, which I'm sure they will because Kansas is on that schedule somewhere. I just don't know when. Next, we're going to talk about the team that you and I have just raved about. We raved about them last week, and that's West Virginia, man. They went up there and they just beat the crap out of Maryland, 45-6. And everyone talks about the Big 12 not having a defense, and we're going to find out if West Virginia truly does have a defense because they still haven't faced a Big 12 offense. But through 3 games, they've looked great.
They have looked great, and that's the team that I feel like might be the most complete team right now. That I'm talking right now as we sit before we've gotten into the meat of the Big 12 schedule. Obviously, that can change. And like you said, they haven't played a Big 12 opponent yet. They're going to get a chance to do that this week against a good one. But I think West Virginia is a team to really keep an eye on. If they can win this next game, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit, that's going to have to be a team that you have to take seriously for the Big 12 Conference Championship.
Talk about the epitome of balance. They had 304 rushing yards and 297 passing yards against Maryland. And Skylar Howard throws 4 touchdowns, throws for almost 300 yards. And he's a dual threat guy, but he only rushed for 13 yards and 12 carries in that game. But obviously passing the ball well. And Maryland had a quarterback, Dax Garman. How many schools can one kid play for?
Well, that's his second or third college, right?
That's his third college.
Okay. But
he went to Arizona, then he went to Oklahoma State, and now he's at Maryland.
How many high schools did he go to?
I want to say 2 or 3.
So
yeah, he went to 3 high schools.
So he is up for the most nomadic quarterback in the country award. So that's impressive. But yeah, 6 schools between high school and college, and about a 3-4 year period. That's pretty impressive.
And for you Dax Garman fans out there, he completed 4 9 passes for 86 yards.
Oof.
And a touchdown and interception. But he didn't look great against TCU last year. I remember when he came in the game. I was thinking this is going to be turnover city. But let's look ahead to the action for this weekend. Of course, we got Texas and TCU. We'll dive into that one last. But a good game that I'm interested to see is Kansas State and Oklahoma State. Kansas State's without their quarterback. Oklahoma State seems to be playing well on offense and defense. And I'm going to go with Oklahoma State in this one.
I think it's Oklahoma State, and I don't think it'll be close. I think Oklahoma State's going to beat the brakes off of K-State.
Texas Tech and Baylor. Does Texas Tech have enough emotion to go down there into AT&T Stadium and compete with Baylor? I know a lot of people are out there saying this game against Baylor is going to be just like it was against TCU. I, for one, don't see that. Patrick Mahomes isn't healthy. I don't think Davis Webb can get it done. Mahomes had a great game. This was last year. This was Mahomes' breakout game. This was the game that everyone started talking about him being a quarterback that can do great things at Texas Tech. I don't think he's going to, even if he does play, I don't think it's going to be enough. Baylor's better defensively than TCU is at this moment. But this will be the first true test for Baylor as far as playing a team that can go step for step with them. But I do think that Baylor's probably going to end up winning by at least 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns if it's too close for Art Briles and he wants to get some style points out there, which I could very easily see them doing. But I'm going to go with the Bears in this one.
And I got Baylor too, and for a lot of the same reasons. Mahomes is not healthy. I mean, he played that whole second half of the TCU game banged up, limping around. It seriously, kept him from running around with the football a little bit, and that's a part of his game. That's a big factor that they're going to be missing. That the Red Raiders will. So I don't think that Baylor's going to be able to necessarily stop Tech from scoring a whole lot. I think Tech will probably score quite a bit. But you're probably looking at a 55-45 type game, something like that. So, but I think Baylor wins that one.
Now, probably the game that everyone's going to be watching besides TCU and Texas is that West Virginia-Oklahoma game. And as we mentioned, West Virginia is finally going to get a test to see how good their defense is. Oklahoma obviously moves the ball well with Baker Mayfield in offense. Samaje Perine, or Perine, I don't know why I said Perine. Joe Mixon, those guys are getting it done on offense. Their offensive line seems to be gelling together. But West Virginia's got to come down to Norman. I don't know if that's the best scenario for them, but if West Virginia can come in and get an upset over Oklahoma, then I think people are going to start giving credit to the Mountaineers where credit is due. Right now, West Virginia's ranked 23rd, but I'm going to have to go with Oklahoma just because I think they can outscore West Virginia. I'm not so certain that West Virginia is going to be able to keep up with Oklahoma's offense. So give me the Sooners in that one. I don't know what the score is going to be. I could see a 37-27 type game, but I think the Sooners are going to remain undefeated in this one.
Oklahoma's a 7-point favorite in this game, but I am going to call for the upset. I think West Virginia is going to go in there with their defense, and they're going to frustrate the Sooners, and I think they're going to walk out of Norman with the win.
The main thing is how many guys will Carl Joseph knock out? Will he knock
that guy?
Will he knock a guy out of this game?
The way he hits, you'd think he's 6'3", 220-pound safety. He's not.
He's like 5'11", 185.
And he brings it every time. So that's one of the scariest hitters in the Big 12. But I like West Virginia in that. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I'm definitely going to have the DVR rolling. That's one I really want to see.
The one I really want to see is Kansas and Iowa State because I know that's going to be a great barn burner.
Is that game even on TV?
Well, I'm going to find it. I will find it on cable access.
I just want to know what the ratings are for that game. It's got to be
Cyclone Cable Network. I'm going to find it somewhere. But no disrespect to these two teams, but it's not going to be the marquee matchup of the West Virginias, Oklahomas, or Texas Tech and Baylor. But I'll be honest with you, until I see some kind of pulse for Kansas, I'm not going to pick them to win one game this year. Iowa State's going to win this game. Iowa State's probably going to win this game by at least 17 points.
And they're 16-point favorites in this game, and I think they win this handily. They're not a great team by any stretch of the imagination, but they seem like they've got it together a lot better than the Jayhawks do at this point. And you start to ask yourself, what team in Division I football doesn't have it together better than the Jayhawks at this point? I really just don't think I've ever – even when they've had some bad seasons – I don't think I've seen them this bad. Not in a long, long time. So
and they knew going in that it was going to be a long season just because we saw what their team looked like last year with all those seniors.
Yeah.
And, man, when they lost some I don't want to say great players because Kansas really wasn't a great team, but in their
guys that had played together for a long time.
And speaking Kansas, they did lose a lot of contributors and a lot of senior leaders off that team, and it's obviously showing right now. But last game, Texas and TCU. I think TCU is going to have enough offense. I think Boykin and Dotson are going to have another big game. I think Aaron Green's going to have a good game. I'd watch out for Kyle Hicks. I think Kyle's I think he's going to be at a point where he's going to get about 3 or 4 carries. I think he proved a little bit against Texas Tech. That he does deserve a little bit more touches. I was surprised that Sean Nixon didn't get a lot of touches. I think Kevontae Turpin's going to get more touches this game, and the offense is going to roll. I want to say TCU's probably going to put up at least between 45 and 55 points, and I think Texas goes out with about 28 points. 20 to 28 points in this game. I just think for a 4-2-5, I think Gary's going to show Hurd a lot of different looks, and I don't believe Hurd with his receivers, like Mahomes and Tech receivers, if he gets 4 or 5 seconds to throw, I think it's going to favor TCU more than it will Texas, just because Texas Tech and Mahomes already have that connection that I don't think Texas has yet with Hurd and his receivers.
I agree. Other than the West Virginia OU game, you and I are pretty close along the same lines of what's going to happen this week. All the way down to the actual score of this game, I actually, in my mind, I'm thinking a 49 to 28 type game. And the spread is that really 15 still?
Yeah.
I just don't see Texas being able to score enough. I think some of the younger frogs on defense are going to get a chance to really step up and improve this week. I think the crowd's going to be really into it, even though it is an 11 o'clock game. Anytime Texas comes into town, obviously last year, 2 years ago, you had that storm delayed game that was just miserable. Took the crowd right out of it, and up until that point, the crowd was in it. TCU was playing okay, but it's like that storm happened and it just took all the mojo with it. So
I don't think there's any rain in the forecast for Saturday. Matter of fact, someone posted today. It's 71 at kickoff.
It's gonna be a beautiful day. I think TCU rolls in this game. I think 49 to 28 sounds about right.
It's going to be an early ball game. People are going to have to get out there, and they're not going to be able to tailgate for a long time. No, it's going to interfere with the kids' soccer games, but
get out there early, guys.
You got the number 4 team in the country to go out there and support. So
yeah, somehow they keep sliding in the rankings.
So I'm glad you changed your prediction, because I know after the Tech game you were thinking the Frogs were going to lose to Texas, but I'm glad you changed your mind.
No, I like what that Tech game has done for this team. I really do. I think it's going to give them that boost they need. They know that they can play. They just got to start trusting themselves and what the coaches tell them, and just continue to get better each week.
Let's talk about a different boost. Let's talk recruiting boost. Seems there's going to be some pretty big names coming into town. The list probably won't be complete until Thursday or Friday, because coaches are on the horn all week trying to get confirmed visitors. But a couple big names already: Cameron Lewis, Baron Browning, Sean Robinson's going to be there already a commit. I think this is going to be a pretty good visitor list, and then we'll obviously talk more about it later in the week as we start to get more names. But Baron Browning coming back, I said it last week.
Yeah,
I said it last week, and he even said it in a story. He's committed to Baylor, but his recruitment's still open. He wouldn't be making these visits if his recruitment's not open.
And we didn't have an update with him after the last game, but that doesn't mean that there's not interest in TCU still.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's ways to get around when kids don't talk to you, and it's the same scenario that I have trying to find out information about the team, and you and I finding out stuff about how long have we been calling Isaiah Chambers to TCU, and it wasn't Isaiah telling us that he was coming to TCU months ago. We had enough nuggets out there that we were able to get the information out there, and it's the same kind of scenario. I'm not saying Barron's going to commit to TCU. I'm just saying that it is not over, and I do know when the programs can start sending out letters September 1st to 2017 recruits. Baron Browning was at the top of that list. So obviously the coaches are going to be hitting him up pretty hard, and if you can get a guy like that on your 2017 list, that's great with what they got building right now. But Cameron Lewis is another guy that,
to me, that's a huge name right there. That's a guy they were really high on, who is an offensive player in high school, but projects as a safety at the college level. And at LSU, obviously, what they do, recruiting defensive backs, and they love Cameron Lewis. And TCU's been on him from the very beginning, and he's stayed in communication with him, and now here he is visiting for a game, so that there's still some sort of interest there, and he wants to come take a look for himself, and what a coup that would be to pull that guy away from LSU.
Hey, they did it last year with Deshaun Raymond, so it's not out of the question. I know a few years ago you really couldn't say that with kids deep in the heart of LSU country leaving the state and going to TCU, but another guy that could happen with is Stephen Sullivan. He released his top 6 this week, and of course TCU's in that, and
then a bunch of SEC schools.
Yeah, Well, I mean, I like TCU's chances with this.
Yeah.
It's just for the simple reason that he's built such a good relationship with the coaching staff. He's visited several times. He understands the impact he can make on offense. They've told him where he could be playing, and we said it all along that he really wants to play receiver, and I think it showed when LSU was kind of recruiting other guys at receiver, and there was word out there that he was really getting recruited to LSU as a defensive end, and I think just a multitude of those things factored into him decommitting, and I still like TCU's chances. I'm still predicting that he's going to end up at TCU as long as they keep doing what they're doing.
I still like TCU's chances as well. I will say this. I had constant contact with Sullivan for quite a while, and that's kind of gone cold right now. So it is during the season, so I'm not sure if he's talking to any of the other writers either right now, but I do know that I haven't had contact with him much at all. We had a brief conversation on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. When I say brief, there's like he answered 2 questions and then I didn't get anything else. So I don't know if he's just kind of shutting it down right now as far as the communication end of it, but I still like TCU's chances as well.
Well, let's talk real quick, because I know it was brought up on the board this morning about D'Eriq King and kind of where he stands. Our good friend Brian Peroni had told me that people he talks with down there in the Houston area, and Brian's dialed into Houston. I know a lot of people probably don't want to hear that, but he is dialed in down there in Houston, and one of the things he knows about is obviously Manville football, and with D'Eriq looking around, it's not a knock on TCU by any means. It's more of the, hey, I want to play quarterback at the next level. And when you have a guy, and I know obviously Houston has Bowman Sells committed to him, but when you have a guy like Greg Ward, who is basically a older clone of D'Eriq King, the coaches are going to sell that to the kid at Houston.
Sure.
And so he looks at that, and he knows he can go down there and make plays if Greg Ward can.
And I have no doubt that he could in that offense at that level of competition. The schedule that Houston plays, I think D'Eriq could do a really good job at Houston. You'd hate to lose a playmaker like that, and also what it could mean to other committed players. I think the Houston connection between these guys is strong, but I think as far as who you would be concerned with him actually taking with him, as far as not necessarily that person going to Houston with him if he committed, but maybe decommitting or looking around, Austin Myers would probably be the one.
Yeah, Austin is the guy I mentioned on the board, and that would definitely be a big loss because, I mean, he's obviously one of the best offensive linemen in the country, and we're not saying by any means that D'Eriq's going to decommit from TCU, but it is something that is worth watching just because you know what his aspirations are to play quarterback at the next level, and he's being recruited to TCU as a quarterback, but he also understands there's another pretty good quarterback that's committed to him right now, and there's another pretty good quarterback committed to him right now in the 2017 class. So you got not only one of the top quarterbacks committed next to him in the 2016 class, and you got one of the top 5 quarterbacks committed to him a class below you. Plus you have guys like Kenny Hill and Foster Sawyer and Grayson Muhlstein already on the roster. It's a pretty loaded cupboard of quarterbacks.
Sure. And I've heard other people say, you're going to get competition anywhere you go. That's true, but I don't see too many rosters and upcoming rosters that have the quarterback talent and depth that TCU has. And so I think a guy like D'Eriq sees that, and that probably has everything to do with why he's looking around. You just you hate to lose a guy like that if he does indeed decide to switch. Which again, guys, he hasn't switched, but if he did decide, that would be a big loss because he is a dynamic playmaker. And yes, GP would give him a shot at quarterback. I'm not saying he wouldn't. The chances of him winning that job would be a huge uphill battle. So we'll just watch this and see how it plays out. Hopefully he sticks with the Frogs, and all this is just an unneeded conversation.
Let's talk about Denzel Okafor real quick because, when you talked to him last, he did say he was watching TCU and Texas and what they do this season. I've got to think that this game will have an impact on his decision. He's delayed his decision a little bit. I don't know how much longer he's going to delay it. If you had asked me in July where I thought Denzel was leaning, it was obviously TCU. When I talked to him face to face, he couldn't stop talking about TCU. He would talk about Texas and then start talking about TCU. So it was at that point where I thought he was going to be a Horned Frog. And he told me he was going to commit in August and get it out of the way so he could focus on the senior season. That didn't happen, and he told you that he's going to be watching what the teams do, and you've got to think that this game will have an impact on his decision. Now, if it does, I mean, I know a lot of people say, well, TCU beat Texas, we should have won the recruiting battle for him. It's not always just about the win, but he's going to look at the atmosphere of the game. He's going to look at how TCU uses their offense. He's obviously going to get an up-close look at Texas, how they use their offense. I mean, it's going to be probably the best game he'll be able to see. It will be the best game. What am I saying? It will be the best game for him to see to determine where his future fits in best.
You know, and he's tough to read. You know, it is those two schools and everybody else behind them. You get the feeling talking to him that he really wants to just make sure he's making the right choice, and so that's why it got pushed from August to September, and now from September into probably early October. Well, obviously it will be early October. The last time I talked to him, he said he felt like after about 4 or 5 games into the season, he should have a decision made. So obviously, plan on following up with him after this Texas game this weekend, and to kind of see where he is. The last time I talked to him, he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it for the game. But I will follow up with him this week to see if he's going to see if he can be able to make it into Fort Worth. But we'll definitely follow up with him again after the game and kind of see where everything stands.
Yeah, I mean, like always, we're going to follow up with all the recruits that we see there. Against SMU, there were some pretty good names, and obviously some names that didn't show up. But again, we'll find out more of the names that are expected to be in attendance this Saturday for the game. I expect a good looking list of recruits to be there. Obviously, better than SMU. But you know, a lot of exciting times right now. I'm pumped up for this game, and I know a lot of fans are. People getting ready to see the Burnt Orange come to town. It's Texas. They're not the Texas of the past, but it is Texas. You're going to see a lot of Burnt Orange in Fort Worth, and should be a great environment. And what do you think? We forgot to talk about this earlier, but what do you think TCU has to do to get this win?
Well, just execute their offense. I mean, I really don't see Texas being able to stop their offense. But they've obviously, to me, the number one key for TCU is to contain Gerard Hurd. That's really the only thing that scares me on the Texas offense is if you let that guy get free and start running around and he runs for 250 yards, a couple fluke plays here and there, and all of a sudden you lose to the Longhorns. That is not completely inconceivable. So you got to do is you got to control Gerard Hurd. Don't let him. You know, I don't think you can sit back and just not rush. I mean, we've talked about this the last couple of weeks. You got to find the fine balance between bringing pressure and also keeping him contained. But I still think you can't let him just sit back there all day. But you're going to have to bring some pressure, but you have to be smart with the pressure you bring.
I say the biggest key, don't wear the lizard skin uniform. Please stop. I'm just not a fan. But I won't. You're not a big fan of the uniforms at all this year.
Well,
you're not a recruit. You're not 17-year-old.
Exactly. I am nobody, so it doesn't matter what I think about these uniforms. But I've just seen so many amazing uniform combinations over the last 5-10 years for TCU. I'm not a fan of what they put out there this year yet. Maybe something else will come along that I'll like that they'll wear this year, but. As of yet, I'm still waiting.
Well, I know what you like during the games anyway, but I'm not going to get into that right now.
I'm not sure where you're going with that, Jeremy Clark.
Well, guys, as always, it's been a blast doing this, and we appreciate you guys listening in. We appreciate you guys' feedback on the board. Look forward to seeing you guys out there Saturday at Fort Worth. You see us, come up, say hi. We'll talk to you. We're not one of those angry reporter dudes that don't like to talk to
No, we love to talk to people. Come introduce yourselves.
Give Jeremiah some beer. He loves to drink beer before he goes in the press box. And,
he's got to sneak it to me.
Yeah. He's got a flask. Don't let him fool you. Thank you guys once again for listening in. For Jeremiah Glenn, I'm Jeremy Clark. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening, guys.